Hey everyone, we know how hard it can be to keep up with the latest news in Israel, so if you haven't had the time to stay on top of what's what in the Holy Land with ILTV, have no worries. It's time for our new show this week in Israel, where we'll give you the scoop on everything you need to know about the last 7 days right from Tel Aviv. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, here to keep you informed. We've been seeing a major policy shift in Hamas recently, and it looks like we're now seeing the first real results of these developments. Egypt has just come forward to broker a brand new prisoner swap between Israel and Hamas, a deal that potentially gives Israel its first ever intel on the Israeli citizens and soldiers currently being held in Gaza. With the humanitarian crisis in Gaza quickly deteriorating by the day, many speculate that Hamas has been running out of options. This latest compromise on a prisoner swap deal from Egypt would certainly be evidence of that. Contrary to past refusals to even negotiate, Hamas is now reportedly ready to begin talks with Israel, and with zero preconditions. Egypt is proposing that Israel transfer the bodies of 39 Palestinians to Hamas, nearly half of which are Hamas operatives, all in exchange for intel on missing Israeli civilians and soldiers imprisoned in Gaza since the last war. Hamas is currently believed to be holding at least 3 Israeli citizens captive, as well as the bodies of at least 2 Israeli soldiers killed in combat. If Israel were to agree to this deal, however, it would then also be required to free 54 Palestinian prisoners rearrested after the Gilad Shalit deal. While Israel has refused any past negotiations involving Gilad Shalit prisoners, this new offer is the first to include concrete proof on these captured Israelis. Debates are already swirling, but for now, the ball is in Israel's court. This is an issue that the Israeli Prime Minister harped on during his trip to Argentina after he, of course, praised the Argentine president's efforts to solve the bombing of a Buenos Aires Jewish center in 1994, a terror incident that has been blamed on, guess who? Iran.
We know without a doubt that Iran and Hezbollah were backing up and in fact initiated these attacks. And I can say that Iran's terror has not stopped since then. They have a terror machine that encompasses the entire world with their sidekick Hezbollah. They're operating terrorist cells through many continents, including in Latin America.
85 people were killed in the Amia bombing, but critics accuse former Argentine leader Cristina Fernández de Kirchner of trying to improve ties with Iran rather than bringing the bombers to justice. Under Kirchner, the prosecutor probing the Amia attack was found dead just hours before he was supposed to appear in Congress to prove his accusation that the Argentine leader had whitewashed Iran's role in the bombing. Current President Mauricio Macri came into power in 2015 and has since boosted ties with Israel while also reinitiating a proper investigation into the attack. Not everybody is happy about that in Argentina, and the Israeli Prime Minister's visit was met with several protests.
Es realmente un genocida. Netanyahu, queremos denunciar la complicidad del gobierno entreguista de Macri, que sabiendo que es un genocida, lo invita a nuestro país oficialmente.
It's clear that no protest is going to stop flourishing Israeli-Argentine ties, however. Netanyahu and Macri signed a series of agreements during the Israeli Prime Minister's visit, including a public security deal to enhance cooperation between the police forces of both countries, a social insurance agreement, and a customs deal. Argentina also handed over almost 140,000 historic documents to Israel to provide deeper insight into the Holocaust. Now, in a surprising and somewhat awkward move, it looks like Qatar is attempting to establish warmer ties with the American Jewish community. Qatar has hired a leading PR firm based in Washington, D.C. to help arrange meetings with several prominent American Jewish leaders. The Arab nation will be paying a whopping $50,000 a month to the PR firm, Stonington Strategies, to help improve the Emirates' ties with U.S. Jews. The meetings are scheduled to take place when the Emir and Crown Prince visit the United Nations General Assembly in New York next week. But several Jewish leaders are not planning to meet with Qatari officials anytime soon. Among them is
Mort Klein, the head of the pro-Israel Zionist Organization of America, who said it looks very much like this is a public relations attempt to moderate Qatar's image as a country that supports and funds terrorism. Qatar's auto request comes on the heels of their ongoing diplomatic feud with several Gulf states, including Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the United Arab Emirates, which claim Qatar supports terrorism and is attempting to interfere in local political affairs by using its channel Al Jazeera. The request to meet with U.S. Jewish leaders also comes just weeks after the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu called on the Qatari-based news outlet to be expelled from Israel.
Rumors are swirling that a historic secret meeting has just gone down in Israel between the Israeli government and the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. With us on this potential game changer is ILTV's Aaron Poor. So Aaron, what exactly and where exactly are these rumors coming from?
Well, the rumors are coming from a lot of different locations. Primarily, they started off in Arab media, Arab-sourced media. That being said, rumors are rumors. They should be taken with a grain of salt.
Right.
And although it is a very positive rumor, and there's a lot of evidence of Israel and Saudi Arabia having had certain diplomatic relations kind of really under the radar, really behind closed doors, but that's getting a little bit better and better over the years. And it's still, unfortunately, however, not the right time, at least publicly in Saudi Arabia and in much of the Arab world, to come out and say the Prince of Saudi Arabia has shown up in Israel. It's not a very popular decision. Not to mention that shortly after the allegations that he had arrived, Saudi Arabia tried to play it off, saying, "Oh no, Qatar sent people to Israel." So it's been an interesting kind of last few developments. But you're right. If it was the Saudi prince, it is a major game changer, and I'll tell you why in the report.
A visit like this from Saudi royalty is obviously a big deal, considering the two countries have no official relations. Though Saudi Arabia has never actively been involved in any previous wars against Israel, the country has heavily aligned itself with the Palestinians and has actively pushed for Israel's withdrawal from the West Bank. The rumors have ignited harsh criticism from the Arab world, who have condemned the Saudis for allegedly meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu himself and discussing security ties between the two countries. While there have always been rumors of secret ties between Israel and Saudi Arabia for isolated economic and military operations, a visit from the crowned prince on Israeli soil would mean a significant upgrade is already underway. For now, this news has been neither confirmed nor denied by the Israeli or Saudi government, only fueling more speculations.
All right. In the face of a crippling humanitarian crisis in Gaza, Hamas has been dramatically rewriting its strategy lately, and now they've just put a game changer on the table. Hamas has announced that they're ready to begin reconciliation talks with the Palestinian Authority's Fatah party, which could change the Palestinian world completely. Fatah and Hamas have been bitter rivals since 2007 when Hamas seized Gaza from President Abbas's government. This has put the Palestinian president in a difficult position since plans for a potential Palestinian state require Gaza as part of the deal. That's one of the reasons why Abbas has been furiously applying pressure on Hamas over the last few months, by worsening the crisis in Gaza, by cutting electricity payments, and even denying money for medical aid. Hamas has been seeking cooperation from both Egypt and Iran to help cement its position, but now the political head of Hamas has said his side is willing to meet with the PA and finally discuss a reconciliation. If the Palestinian Authority were able to successfully bury the hatchet with the terror group, it would place Gaza back under President Abbas's rule and put the Palestinians in a very new bargaining position in peace talks with Israel. Whether or not this will actually be good news for Israel, however, still remains to be seen. With the situation deteriorating every day in the Gaza Strip, we've been seeing a lot of shifting alliances in the Palestinian world. Well, now it looks like another big change may be underway since the newly elected chief of Hamas has just made his first visit to Cairo, and that's in hopes of mending broken relations with Egypt.
A relationship with Egypt would be a major win for Hamas, but it's something that's been elusive for years. Faced with maintaining security on the Egypt-Gaza border, Cairo has maintained a strict blockade on Gaza, and its only crossing point has remained mostly closed. Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi shut down ties with Hamas because of their relationship with the Muslim Brotherhood, which Egypt still considers to be a terror organization. But this new diplomatic mission could mean that's all about to change.
وفد حركة حماس برئاسة الأخ سمعين هنية من الداخل والخارج سوف يبحث مع المسؤولين المصريين قضايا مهمة على رأسها سبل تعزيز العلاقات الثنائية مع مصر الشقيقة، وأيضا متابعة التفاهمات المصرية الفلسطينية مع حركة حماس بما يخص قطاع غزة وتخفيف الحصار وتخفيف معاناة أهلنا في القطاع. أيضا سوف يتطرق الوفد إلى قضايا وطنية فلسطينية على رأسها سبل تعزيز المصالحة الوطنية الفلسطينية وإنهاء انقسام وتوحيد الصف الداخلي الفلسطيني.
With conditions crumbling in the Gaza Strip, some see this visit as an indication that Hamas may be running out of options. The meeting in Cairo will also include talks on restoring unity between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority's Fatah party, a conflict at the heart of Gaza's humanitarian crisis. In another change of heart, Hamas has also just bought millions of barrels of diesel fuel from Egypt after months of refusing to pay at all. Hamas is making this $25 million purchase to alleviate a crippling energy crisis, one that leaves Gaza residents with only a handful of hours of electricity a day. But this is all mounting evidence that Hamas may be cornered and fighting for its life right now.
All right, we've seen reports over the last few weeks of shifting priorities and strategies within Hamas. But now the head of the Shin Bet is saying that the terror group is gearing up for war and with the support of Iran is even setting up a base in Lebanon.
3 years after the last war with Israel, Hamas now finds itself at a turning point. As evident by the disastrous conditions in Gaza, the terror group is determined to rearm itself and put all its resources into a future war with Israel, even at the cost of harming its own citizens. At the same time, Hamas may not be strategically ready for combat with its resources and leadership spread very thin. But the head of the Shin Bet, Nadav Argaman, believes that things are ramping up in Hamas even as we speak, and that the terror group is not only ready for war, but has even spread into Lebanon and is now setting up a new military base over there. That's because Iran has quickly become the leading financer of Hamas's efforts to destroy the Jewish state, even using its influence to allow Hamas to build inside Lebanese territory. This is on top of at least 2 missile factories Iran is believed to be building in South Lebanon, and dozens of reports of Iranian weapon shipments being smuggled into Hezbollah in the region. Last March, Prime Minister Netanyahu announced that Iran was responsible for 80% of Israeli security concerns, and from the sound of this, that figure isn't far off.
With the growing threat of Iran mounting on all sides, Israel is looking at a potentially devastating conflict on the horizon, but it looks like Israel may need some help. The IDF's former deputy chief of staff has just told an American security conference in Washington that Israel cannot fight alone. Major General Yair Golan attended the council with top U.S. military minds at the request of Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman. After acknowledging Iran's advanced infrastructure and even commending the Arab nation's progressive schools, industries, and talented youth, the Major General noted that the country was actually similar to Israel in many ways, and that these similarities were what posed the most dangerous threat of all. For decades, we've dealt with ISIS-style terrorism. I don't say it's not a problem, but we managed to live with that. But when looking at the Iranian threat, it's much more dangerous compared to the ISIS threat, Golan told the council. The former IDF chief openly admitted that a direct military confrontation with Iran would be beyond Israel's capability, which is why Israel needs American help as well as in the war to come. It's becoming increasingly clear that Israel may find itself in an armed conflict with Iran in the future, which means the army will need to be ready at any moment. All right, well, after being served some of the harshest sanctions in the history of the United Nations, North Korea is now firing back at the world's leaders, and it's promising horrifying consequences for the United States.
The DPRK is ready to use any form of ultimate means. The forthcoming measures by DPRK will make the U.S. suffer the greatest pain it's never experienced in its history. Thank you.
This comes less than 24 hours after the UN Security Council unanimously voted to restrict gas and coal exports from the country, following North Korea's successful test of a hydrogen bomb. North Korea has been ramping up its nuclear program with terrifying speed recently, including the development of ballistic missiles capable of reaching U.S. soil. These are concerns even Prime Minister Netanyahu is feeling during his trip in Latin America, where he took the opportunity to parallel the importance of limiting Iran's nuclear program.
We understand the dangers of a rogue nation having atomic bombs. In the case of Iran, there have been some news stories about Israel's purported position on the nuclear deal with Iran. So let me take this opportunity and clarify. Our position is straightforward. This is a bad deal. Either fix it or cancel it. This is Israel's position.
Israel has been against the nuclear deal with Iran from the very beginning, fearing nuclear weapons in the hand of Israel's most dangerous enemy. President Trump campaigned on his promise to cancel the deal, but so far the American president has voted to keep it where it is. No doubt this will certainly come up when they meet in New York later this month for the UN.
Well, it's been just over a week since President Donald Trump made the landmark decision to give 6 months' notice to ending DACA, the program that has been protecting undocumented immigrants who arrived to the United States as children. Well, the announcement is still causing outrage within the Jewish American community, especially since there are quite a few so-called Jewish dreamers who are being affected as well. Dreamers, that's the term used to refer to recipients of DACA, or the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program. DACA was launched back in 2011 by former U.S. President Barack Obama, and it allows individuals who entered the U.S. as minors to receive 2-year renewable permits to stay in the country. That way, they can work and study instead of facing deportation. Well, about 800,000 so-called dreamers are currently enrolled in DACA, and a fair amount of them are actually Jewish. The Jewish organization Aguda says they've been hearing from Jewish dreamers since 2012, right after DACA was officially launched, and many of them had tried to apply for a green card or employment sponsorship, and it just didn't go their way, including orphan Jewish children who grew up in the country unaware that their parents were undocumented immigrants at all. With President Trump's controversial choice to end DACA and leave the aftermath up to Congress, it means the future has just become very uncertain for the 800,000 dreamers, Jewish and non-Jewish alike, who have made lives for themselves in the United States. After months of speculation and years of rumors, Israel's Attorney General has just confirmed that he will be criminally indicting Sarah Netanyahu for fraud. That means the Prime Minister's wife will be formally accused of using over $100,000 of state money for her own private expenses. A 16-page draft of the indictment alleges that Netanyahu and a former deputy director of the Prime Minister's office fraudulently spent thousands each month on luxury meals. That's up to $7,000 a month for years. The court documents details how the Prime Minister's wife apparently tried to conceal her spending by telling the public their house didn't employ a home chef. Sarah Netanyahu was facing a slew of other allegations as well, including using state funds to buy personal furniture and covering her father's medical expenses. But for now, Attorney General Avichai Mendelblit will only move forward with charges on the fraudulent meal expenses. Sarah Netanyahu has denied any wrongdoing in the matter, but it looks like she'll have to prove her case in court in the near future. The High Court has decided to strike down the exemption of the ultra-orthodox from army service, and the move is fiercely dividing the Jewish state. Here with the latest on this is ILTV's Brett Allen Smith. Now, Brett, this issue has been at the core of Israeli debate for generations. Now, where are both sides coming from on this?
Well, it's exactly like you're saying. I mean, even just in terms of the numbers here, the military is one of the biggest, if not the single biggest line item on Israel's budget. Now, on top of that, the army also is Israel's one of the most significant equalizers for the society. So by not drafting, the Haredim become just that much more distant from the rest of the majority who, of course, are required to serve in the army. Now, on the other hand, the ultra-Orthodox argue that they serve a critical role in Israel's society by preserving the state's religious identity, and that's something that they feel they can't really do if they're forced to draft. Now, that's basically been, up to now, the government's position on the matter, even giving Haredi families money from the government so that they can study Torah in lieu of working or doing the army.
Right. Well, as I understand things now, the court's verdict sends things back to the government to come up with a new plan. What will this be like for the Knesset?
I would say difficult, most likely. Obviously, the ultra-Orthodox parties are completely up in arms over this, promising new laws to undo the decision, while other Knesset members, including Israel's own defense minister, they're saying it's high time that every Israeli serve their country equally, regardless of religion or race. And this, of course, puts Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu in a very tough position, as you'll see right now in the report. Israel's Supreme Court has just made a controversial decision on an issue that has divided the state of Israel for generations. Since the birth of Israel's army, the ultra-Orthodox have been granted full exemption from the mandatory draft into the IDF, a sacrifice required of every Israeli teenager when they hit the age of 18. That leaves nearly 10% of the country's population free from army service to study Torah, at a time when many argue that Israel needs its soldiers now more than ever. The IDF has just launched its largest northern drill in decades to prepare for a potential war with Hezbollah, and even boosted salaries and benefits for combat troops. But this latest verdict from the High Court has just changed everything by declaring the long-standing Haredi exemption unconstitutional. The courts have now given the government just a year to propose a new policy on ultra-Orthodox drafting, putting Knesset members at odds even within their own parties, with some MKs denouncing the decision and others saying it's high time all members of the society equally contribute. Almost all agree that Prime Minister Netanyahu has a difficult decision ahead of him.
All right, well, we all know that ice cream is awesome, but I'll bet you didn't know that it also promotes peace. That's the mission of Buza, the gourmet ice cream chain co-founded by a Jewish and an Arab dessert chef who just won a peace prize from the United Nations for their delicious treat. Adam Ziv is from Kibbutz Sasa, and ever since he was a kid, he's dreamed of nothing but ice cream. Ala Sweitat, on the other hand, grew up in the Arab village of Tel Shia, a place where they didn't even have ice cream, just sorbet. But history was made years ago when Ziv found himself in the restaurant where Sweitat was working. Both of them agreed to open up their first Buza ice cream parlor right in the middle of the Arab village. Boasting classic flavors as well as totally original local blends, the chain quickly took off and now has 5 locations across northern Israel and Tel Aviv. The two co-founders share the same dream of bringing together Jews and Arabs with the universally loved delicacy, and they hope that when families come to their parlor, kids end up playing together and parents begin talking with one another as well. Now, the joint Jewish-Arab business has just made history by landing Israel's very first peace prize of its kind from the United Nations. And I don't know about you, but all of this talk of ice cream isn't just making me hungry, it's actually making me kind of happy too. And now it's time for our top 5. It's that time of year again, holiday season here in Israel. So if you're looking to end your year by giving out some unique Israeli cheer, here are the top 5 coolest gifts under $100 made right here in Israel. All right, let's start with Mobigo. There's nothing worse than when your cell phone runs out of battery and you realize you've left your charger at home. That's where Mobigo comes in. It's a disposable charger that doesn't even need an outlet. This mini charger fits on a keyring in your wallet and you can just plug it into your phone on the go. Best of all, it only costs $8. Up next is my Sticko. This simple to use gadget is just 5 grams, but it can hold up to 100 times its weight. It sticks to almost any surface and can serve as a phone holder in the car, a dish towel hanger in the kitchen, to even a soda can holder on a lawn chair. At only $9.90, this might be the most useful gift you'll ever get. All right, there's nothing like a refreshing drink, especially if it comes in the Israeli product, the right cup. This recyclable plastic drinking cup tricks your senses into thinking that plain water actually has a fruity taste. Lemon, berry, orange, apple, you name it. At just $29, your gift will save its users hundreds of dollars in sugary beverages. Now, coming in at number 4, it's time to make sure your friends stop slouching with Upright. All you have to do is stick this little device onto your back while you're sitting at work, and it will literally buzz every time you start to slouch, forcing you to sit up straight. At just $89, Little Upright is the best gift to make your friends feel and look better. And last but not least, here's a gift that will make your memories last a lifetime in the coolest way possible. Selfly. Selfly is a flying drone camera that doubles as a smartphone case. All you have to do is detach Selfly from the back of your phone, toss it into the air, and then regulate the picture you want to take by tapping your phone. Just like an ordinary picture at $99, this gift promises the best angle possible. All right, that's it for today's top 5, but don't forget to tune in next week. That's it for this week's Roundup. Tune in next Friday for our next episode of This Week in Israel. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us from Tel Aviv.